This is episode 21 of the Women in Depth podcast. The information found in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hi, and welcome back to the podcast. One of the goals I envisioned when creating Women in Depth was to create a space where it is safe to explore the parts of a woman's life that are uncomfortable, unfamiliar, and hidden from view. Areas that are misunderstood, feared, and lie beneath the surface of everyday life. Some of these topics may even be considered taboo, unconventional, or just really sensitive topics. Today's topic fits into that description. We are all aware that the mother-daughter relationship can have its difficulties and challenges, but there is another aspect of the mother-daughter relationship that has the potential to significantly impact all areas of a woman's life, and that is the mother wound. The mother wound includes the pain of not feeling good enough, a consistent background sense that there is something wrong with you, feeling you must remain small in order to be loved, and an ongoing sense of guilt for wanting more than you currently have. The mother wound can show up in a woman's life as not being your full self because you don't want to threaten others, having a high tolerance for poor treatment from others, emotional caretaking, feeling competitive with other women, self-sabotage, being overly rigid and dominating, and conditions such as eating disorders, depression, and addictions. So I'm very excited to share today's conversation with Bethany Webster, who takes us deeper into this topic, exploring what the mother wound is, how it takes shape, why it matters, and more importantly, how women can begin to heal and therefore transform their lives. Today, my guest is Bethany Webster. Bethany is a writer, transformational coach, international speaker, and what you could call a midwife of the heart. Her work is focused on helping women heal the mother wound so that they can step into their divine feminine power and potential. Bethany coaches successful women on how to heal the mother wound so that they can make a quantum leap in their impact and leadership. Bethany is the author of the forthcoming book, Healing the Mother Wound, Move Beyond What Your Mother Never Gave You and Become the Woman You're Meant to Be. Bethany, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me here. I'm thrilled to be here today.
I think, Bethany, just the best place to start is maybe finding out a little bit more about how you were drawn into this work around the mother wound.
Sure, yeah. My journey of coming to do this work has been a long journey, and it's not something I kind of set out to do. But the work, me committing to doing this really comes out of a long journey of working through my own mother wound. My pattern with my mother was that I really played the role of her caretaker, counselor, her therapist. I really carried a lot of responsibility for my mother's emotional well-being from a very early age. And, growing up, I had a lot of symptoms like low self-esteem, poor boundaries, a lot of shame. I felt like there was something wrong with me. And I was kind of an approval seeker. And I got a lot of my own sense of value from what I gave to other people. And I received a lot of validation for the more I was invisible. So I didn't have a lot of sense of who I was. It kind of came to a head for me when I was 19. I had an abortion. I got unexpectedly pregnant when I was in college. And it really served as a kind of a wake-up call to my path and my purpose in life. I was like, I have to figure out what I'm doing with my life. And I had this really strong sense come over me that I really needed to give birth to myself before I could give birth to someone else. And so at the age of 19, I jumped into really intensive therapy with a brilliant therapist, long-term depth psychotherapy. And I also got on a spiritual path. And I realized that the more I really worked on my kind of childhood history, the more open and connected I was on a spiritual level. So it's been an amazing journey, and I'm still on that journey now. But going back in the beginning, I really avoided the mother wound. I did not want to look at my relationship with my mother. I was like, no way. I worked on a ton of other things, my relationship with money, my romantic relationships, my career. I worked on a lot of issues, but I avoided looking at my relationship with my mother because it was just taboo and scary. And I just thought, well, maybe if I just, really focus on the spiritual stuff, or maybe if I just get more credentials and work on other things, then it will just kind of take care of itself. I think that was really what my hope was. But what I actually ended up realizing was that the more, whatever I worked on, it always ended up coming back to that same central core, which was the limiting beliefs and patterns that I internalized as a result of the dynamics I had with my mother. And so I thought, okay, here we go. I really have to look at this. I saw that not looking at it was actually postponing, a form of postponing me really taking ownership of my life. So I got enough courage to begin looking at it directly rather than vicariously through all these other things. And it was hard and painful. Something magical and unexpected happened along the way, which was the more I worked on my mother wound and healing the pain that was there, the more reconnected I began to feel with life itself. And I began to have these unexpected moments of what I used to call unity experiences, where I felt like I could actually viscerally feel my connection with all life and with nature. I had moments where I just felt like everything that I'm connected with, like a web, like that everything's okay. I used to have these really strong moments of feeling that I was in the right place at the right time. Like I actually began to feel that for the first time that I was in my body. For the first time, I felt like I belonged on the planet. And it was really curious to me. I thought, why am I having these experiences? And then I realized that it was because it was connected to me working on healing the mother wound. And I was really hungry for information. I was like, why isn't anyone talking about this? That the mother wound, actually, we can work through it and heal it. And not only that, it is a portal into our deeper connection with life itself and with all beings, with our bodies, with the earth. And so I was really hungry for it, but I wasn't finding much about it, especially the spiritual component to it. And so I began writing myself and basically started writing the information that I wish I could have found about it. And it was kind of a form of me integrating my experiences on this journey and kind of mapping out the steps that I had taken so that other women could take it as well. And so I became really passionate about sharing with women that, the mother wound isn't something we need to avoid or feel shame about, but it's actually a doorway. It's a doorway, and I believe in a form of initiation for women into taking sovereign ownership over our own lives as individuals. So I'll stop there. There's so much to say.
Wow, I remember reading on your website where you wrote that the mother wound is the first wound to the heart that a daughter experiences. And it's not only the first wound, it's like the wound of wounds. I mean, it affects everything.
It really does. It really does. And part of my goals in helping people see the gift inside of this wound is that when we really begin to take in the magnitude of the wound, like you're saying, and what we also do is take in the magnitude of women and the power of women and mothers, and not only women and mothers, but also the magnitude of the feminine in all of us. And I think once we begin to see how we can be wounded, we can also take in the power of, the positive power of the feminine within all of us, and to access that and embody it and love it and take a stand for it, because I really think the mother wound is actually, a result of men and women living in a patriarchal culture that devalues the feminine. I think that's why we see the mother wound as we do.
Yeah.
This atmosphere of devaluing the feminine, I believe, is what creates the manifestations of the mother wound that we see. So I think there's such a power in bringing attention to this, because so many women and men suffer in isolation with this. I mean, mothers are either, deified, on one side, like mothers are next to God, they can never be questioned. And mothers are also degraded and devalued and dumped upon. So we have this kind of very extreme view in our culture of mothers. And there's no place really for mothers to be seen as complex, multifaceted human beings. So I think the way that we see mothers actually removes their humanity and their complexity. And so the wound plays out. I actually believe there's a deeper wound in the mother wound, which is a wound with life itself, that basic wound of separation and disconnection. And this wound is crying out right now, in our world. We're seeing just the manifestations of this disconnection. And so I don't think it's a coincidence. I think it's a very positive sign and manifestation that many women around the world right now are feeling the call to heal this wound. And I actually think the mother wound is because it's a product of patriarchy, we are seeing patriarchal institutions fall right now all around us, media, governments. The patriarchy is in such a dysfunctional state. It's collapsing. And so I think that's why the mother wound is coming up right now for so many to be healed, because the mother wound wants to be healed. It's collapsing in us. Something else wants to emerge through it. So I see it as really positive that we're identifying it and looking at it, and hopefully, more. I think the more of us that heal it enough to access the source inside of it, that life-giving medicine that comes from healing the wound. Hopefully in future generations, we will see less and less of the mother wound. That's my hope.
Yeah, as you're speaking, I was thinking of a quote by Rumi, and it goes something like, "The wound is where light enters you." And, when you were speaking about the wound within the wound, and just really this universal experience that is happening on this planet and is connected to all the individuals, really that shift, that energetic move right now in our cultures is something that is calling for attention.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, the more I do this work with, my own work, my own inner work, which drives all of my work in the world, and also the coaching that I do with women and all the women I talk to around the world, it's really amazing. It's such a universal wound. And what I'm so excited about is watching women look at this wound, look at the pain of it, and really allow themselves to feel it. And also, as they take one step into the wound, to process it and feel it, they also take one step further out into the world. And what I mean by
beautiful.
what I mean by that is, and this is something I really want to bring forward, because I'm someone who has been in therapy for almost 18 years now and counting. So I've been on my own journey of deep healing with uncommon rigor. And there were times when I thought, oh my, when is this going to be over? Why am I not healed yet? This just keeps going. And my therapist would say there will come a time when it's light, when it becomes lighter, but you have to keep going, much like a birth, you have to keep going until the light will come. And the light did come. There was a time when the wound stopped being a source of pain and depletion and started to become a life-giving source of wisdom and information and inspiration. And so I really want to, and it doesn't mean that I don't have moments of grief. I have lots of moments of deep grief, but as I enter the wound and enter the grief, I also enter more of my power and more of my deep inner wisdom. And so my goal is really to help people see that what we're all seeking, it's a very old wisdom, much like what Rumi says, that what we're all seeking isn't out there in the techniques and the information and the content that we're constantly consuming. What we're looking for is inside the very last place we want to go, which is those wounds of our childhood, and especially the mother wound. I love watching women and people start to get that, when their faces light up and they get to see, wow, all I have to do is take steps towards myself, and then I get access to my own information, my own inspiration, my own wisdom, my own fire, my own passion, my own authentic, what makes me, and that's really the treasure, and so I hope that, my hope in doing this work too is to help encourage people to look within these places that are, kind of like wastelands. We don't want to look there. They're in shadow, but finding that that's where the light is. That's the true light. And right. I really love that the title of your podcast is Women in Depth. I love that because I think what we need to move towards is being a culture of depth, of looking, being a culture of reflection, where we don't necessarily go outside of ourselves and flee, and kind of recreate that disconnection, but if we could become a culture that looks within first.
And I think, as you were describing these movements of, going within and looking at these painful places, these are all, this getting still, going within instead of focusing on your inner world versus the external. That's also a very feminine energy to be still, to look within, with the masculine energy being more focused on outside and movement that is outwardly directed. But I love that in what you're describing, there's this honoring of all parts, to bring things into balance. So even with the shadow of this wound, by going into the shadow, you bring out its light or its gifts. And by going within, I thought it was beautiful how you said the more a woman, the more anyone goes within, the more able they are to go into the external world in a way that is really honors them, honors who they are.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's why I've started working more and more exclusively as a coach with female leaders and entrepreneurs who are already in positions of leadership and influence. Because my feeling is that the more women heal the mother wound, these kind of women who are already out there, the better chances there are for exponential change. Because as a leader, man or woman, if you have healed your mother wound, you carry your energy differently. And you can create change on a large scale, and you can transform communities and organizations and companies. So that's what I'm really passionate about right now, is looking at the intersection between female leadership and healing the mother wound. Because our mothers, especially for women, and I know this is true for men as well, men definitely have a mother wound, but for women, this gender identification and the way our mothers model this, what it is to be a woman, what's taboo, what's okay, what's acceptable, what's not. These are laid down so deeply into our wiring that in some ways, our mothers have passed down these messages that in some form that, to be safe, you need to be small. Don't call too much attention to yourself. Be silent, put others' needs before yourself. these kind of messages, often passed down unconsciously as a way to keep us safe in a world that doesn't value the feminine, we actually have to disobey these rules.
Yeah.
And we have to disobey these beliefs and limiting self concepts in order to truly access what it is that we're here to do. So a lot about healing the mother wound is actually about getting to this algorithm of safety. What makes us feel safe? What feels unsafe? And especially with the little girl within us. So a lot of this work I teach is around inner mothering, basically transferring that primary sense of attachment that we have with our outer mothers to an inner mother within us. So really learning how to embody the nurturing, loving mother that we needed to the child within us and creating a bond there. Because once the little girl inside of us, and I say girl just because I primarily work with women, once the child within us feels safe with us, what can happen is an enormous shift in our self-concept. And it opens up an enormous amount of possibilities, because what happens is when the child within you knows that she's safe, no matter what, and really trusts that, and it takes a long time and it's an incremental long-term process. But once that happens to a degree, and everybody's different with what that looks like, it opens up a whole new realm of freedom in terms of how you express yourself, how you move in the world, because the child gets that no matter what happens out there, I'm okay. I'm going to be taken care of by my inner mother self. And so all those gifts and the innocence and the wisdom and the vitality of the child within you becomes accessible and integrates into who you are as an adult. And so it flows into your work. This energy flows that was maybe previously frozen through trauma begins to flow into how you show up in the world. And so you actually radiate a whole new level of power, potential, you radiate possibility. And so you're kind of become on fire with the energy of who you really are. And that is transformational. And that's what I aim to teach women to access so that we can really embody the spirit within us.
So it's this process of reparenting that inner child in the way that you were not mothered for whatever reason.
Exactly. So that's really what it comes down to. I teach a 7-step process, and one of the steps is identifying the mother gap. So the gap between what you needed from your mother and what you actually received. And that gap often creates a lot of pain. We usually project that outwards onto our colleagues, our spouses, our friends. It's like this, the hungry child is looking for mother. Yeah. And playing out these dynamics. So it's about making them conscious, and then, learning how to mother that gap, to provide those needs to the child within us. So that's a big piece of it, is the reparenting.
So maybe one thing we can do at this point is to maybe, Bethany, could you speak to exactly what the mother wound is?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. I wanted to mention that. So the mother wound, I actually believe the mother wound has 3 different levels. The personal level is one of them. So on the personal level, the mother wound is any painful dynamics, beliefs, or patterns that originate from your relationship with your mother or your primary mothering figure. Some people, it's not their actually biological mother, but the person who mothered you, the female person who raised you. So that's the personal level of the mother wound. And that's how it impacts, your own beliefs about yourself. I like to say that, our mothers teach us how to treat ourselves. The way our mothers treat us becomes our internalized way of how we treat and value ourselves.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, because you can see how, as an adult, you're unconsciously really mothering yourself in a way that is not very passionate, can be hurtful, abusive, and you're not even aware that you're doing to ourselves, repeating the same, maybe unloving, abusive, unhealthy mothering behaviors that we experience from our own mothers, and we're not even aware that we're almost re-traumatizing ourselves.
Exactly, Lourdes. You described it perfectly. Yeah. And so And the reason why we do it is because our attachment bond was often forged in an environment of disconnection. So it's funny, we actually feel, for many of us to some degree, we feel mothered by very unhealthy things. They feel, because they're kind of wrapped up with that sense of love, safety, and belonging, which are our primary needs as human beings. So we're actually bonded in a way, we're bonded with dysfunction.
Wow.
Because it was laid down so early in our development, and it feels familiar.
So then that's the personal level, right?
That's the
mother
personal
wound.
level.
Okay.
And then the other level is the cultural mother wound, which I kind of alluded to earlier, which is, and what I mean by that is that our culture has been such that women have been told that we're less than, and men have been taught that their feminine side is less than. So this suppression of the feminine, this devaluing of the feminine in our culture creates a mother wound in all of us and it gets passed down through generations. And in the mother line, mothers and daughters through many, many, many generations, it's really created a distortion in how mothers and daughters relate to each other. It creates an atmosphere of scarcity where there's not enough love for all of us. So there's this sense that, women aren't, given enough attention. They're not given enough value. So we have to fight for it among ourselves. It's a very subtle thing. Some families, it's more overt. Some it's very, very subtle. But there's this sense that there's not enough. There's not enough love. And often there's not enough power. So sometimes it turns into a power dynamic where mother and daughter don't feel like they can be equally loved. It's like one loses and one wins. And it often creates an enmeshment between mothers and daughters where there's not a clear delineation of individuality. It's almost like, I hear it a lot from women, when I'm doing really well in my life, they say, my mother's really distant. And when I'm not doing well and I'm struggling, then my mother is really present. So it's kind of this enmeshment energetically between mother and daughter. And so the cultural level is how mothers and daughters throughout many generations have coped with this atmosphere of female devaluing, and how men have coped with their own feminine devaluing, and how it gets fed into our culture in so many different ways. So that's the cultural piece. And then the other piece, the third level of the mother wound, is the spiritual level. And that's the spiritual wound in the mother wound, which is our connection with life itself. Because in those early moments after birth, even into the following hours and days, mother is world, mother is life, mother is self, mother is food. So this is the only relationship in our lives in which we actually are fused with another human being. And our very basic sense of being on this planet is colored by our relationship with our mothers. So we begin to conflate, from an early age, how much we belong here. So mother is life from the beginning. And so we often live our lives going on and through childhood, then adulthood, and then middle adulthood, all through these different parts of our lives, not realizing that our disconnection with our mother, to whatever degree that's happened, influences how disconnected we feel about life and our place here. So this is a big wound here. As you can see, there's 3 levels of the mother wound, in my opinion. This is what I've seen. And the good news is, though, that as each of us heals our personal mother wound, we really have to focus on the personal primarily, because as we do, we help to heal the culture, and we help to heal what I believe is a very human, existential, spiritual wound. They all heal simultaneously. So that's why I really see women who do this work, and men, as pioneers and as cultural change agents and intergenerational healers. Because I think as we do that, as we heal our personal wound, we start to transform the culture. And we also help, I think, humanity to take a large evolutionary step. because what ends up happening as we heal our own wound and the spiritual level, we have to come into contact with our own pain. We have to empathize with ourselves. We have to hold a pain. This is probably the biggest pain we can feel as humans. And it's such a primordial, archetypal wound and an early wound that I think there's a spiritual purpose in it where if we allow ourselves to feel the pain of the mother wound, it has the potential to crack open our hearts to a wider level of compassion than I think we've ever known.
It's really so powerful. I think that the transformation and the potential for impacting, your culture and society as a whole are in direct proportion to the pain of the wound. It's just,
yes,
it's as connected as that wound is to everything. So is the healing process.
Exactly. So that's why I really see myself as a midwife in a way, because I'm helping women through a marathon kind of process of, staying the course. We have so many opportunities in our culture to numb out and to disengage when things get uncomfortable. And it's really about not turning away from ourselves, but really staying with. And I really believe that, this is healed in such incremental long-term, it's a long-term journey. But with each step that we take, we get more access to ourselves. We can feel shifts happening. So, sometimes people say to me, can I just cry for a year and be done with it? But I like to say, no, that's not really how it works. It's we have to take one little step and then we take another little step. And it's really and in many ways, it's a devotional process. We are being called to embody that archetype of, the good enough mother who returns to us again and again, no matter how many times we've fallen, no matter how many times it's it calls us into that role of holding that container of safety for ourselves. Yeah.
Bethany, what are some of the reasons why it is hard to accept and even maybe approach the mother wound? What are some of the taboos about this topic that can really become obstacles for people, for women, for all of us, as we try to heal?
Yes. Well, there's a lot of stereotypes and myths that really keep people away from this healing process. And it's great to talk about them and get them out in the open, because as we do, the less control they have over us, the less they can stop us from really committing to our healing on this wound. So a lot of the stereotypes, I would say the biggest one probably is that you're an ungrateful mother. You're an ungrateful daughter if you look at the painful relationship that you might have with your mother. So that's the cause of a lot of guilt and a lot of shame. So a lot of women feel, oh my gosh, if I work on this issue, I'm automatically a bad daughter. And some women say, my mother sacrificed so much for me. How could I possibly acknowledge my pain with her? So there's this sense of and I really see this as a symptom of the enmeshment inherent in the mother wound, that we see ourselves almost fused with our mothers. And what I seek to do with this particular taboo is to help women see that they're both true. Your mother sacrificed a lot for you. She sacrificed a lot. She struggled in her own life, and your feelings matter.
Yeah, it's not a either or.
It's not an either or. Exactly.
And really also what you were saying earlier, it gives permission for the mother to be human. It honors all her parts, her light and her shadow and everything in between.
That's a huge piece of this journey. Another step of the journey is giving up the impossible dream that one day your mother will change into the mother that you've always longed for her to be. And a lot of us many women don't realize it, but as children, we often create a story or a fantasy, some kind of dream that one day our real mother will come for us. I've heard this from so many people now. It's interesting. It's kind of like the way that the child copes with the trauma that she's enduring is to kind of create a kind of future where the good mother will come. And we just have to get to that time. And a big part of the healing is really giving up that dream. And that's part of allowing your mother, seeing your mother as a human being with flaws and mistakes and also strengths, but giving up that dream that she can be that mother that you longed for. So it's not saying that your feelings don't matter and that you should suppress your dream. It's saying that letting go of that dream returns back to you so much energy that you can use. It's almost like your vision becomes clearer. You become more available for new possibilities. It kind of keeps us in a real childhood place. We don't really reach adulthood, I think, until we give up this dream. But for those of us who have had a lot of trauma, it actually helped us get through a lot.
I can see how that, relinquishing that dream for many women may not even know that they have that dream until, you state it like that. And then there's this, they don't even realize they've had that hope, and that every time something happens, the reason it's so infuriating or crushing or disappointing is because it's that dream not happening again.
Totally. And, as we're talking about it, it brings to mind a situation I had. I was doing a workshop in Boulder, Colorado, and I was teaching about this particular piece of the journey. And this woman, she was so lovely. And she said, you know what? I actually remember being a little girl and saying, one day, my real mother, this person who's my mother right now, she's not my real mother, because my real mother would never do this to me.
Oh, wow.
But someday my real mother is going to come for me. And she was really emotional because she said, I had led them through like a meditation, an inner mothering meditation. And she said, during the meditation, I realized that my adult self, I am the mother I have always been longing for. And I am here now to take care of the child within me. And so I'm here. I'm the one, and I'm here.
Wow. That's powerful.
Yeah. It was really powerful. All of us in the room were just really, tears in our eyes, feeling the power of this. So that's a big part of the journey, realizing our mothers can't fill, our needs. That's a piece of it that we have to grieve. There's a real huge grief there. And then also the good news is that we get to be the mothers to ourselves. We get to be the ones. And so the kind of real inspiration here is that we get to feel the abundance and the wealth and the infinity of love within us. And that we're no longer, children that are dependent on wounded adults to get our needs met. We actually give that child within us a new experience, which is that, she has an adult in her life that can abundantly meet her needs. And it's this inner bond, this inner connection that can form the foundation to really soar in your life, whatever you're doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And so, for those who may have, questions, or they're wondering, but isn't this like holding on to the past, or isn't this focusing on the negative? I'm imagining some of the objections that come up in people's minds or psyches as they wrestle with what we're talking about. What would your response be to those types of questions?
I hear that a lot. I'm so glad you brought that up. That's a big objection that people have, is that, this was in the past is in the past. Why bring it forward now? My mother tried her best, all of that. And what I say to people that bring that up is, the past isn't really in the past. It's really an illusion. The past is here every day in the struggles, the obstacles that we experience in our lives. That's really what challenges are. They're opportunities for us to heal the stuff that is unresolved in our lives. So I really challenge people who say the past is in the past, because the past lives now. You know, the very same recurring, repeating issues that we see, whether in our career, and our relationships, that's the past popping its head up and saying, hey, you know, this needs to be looked at again. And it will continue to come up again and again until we see the opportunity, the healing opportunity that our challenges present us with. And I really encourage people to see this not as, oh man, you know, I'm still not healed. Some people can really get down on themselves. There's this sense of final destination that we should be healed, we should be fine.
Yeah.
I really like to encourage people to see that this is an adventure. This is a spiritual adventure, this lifetime that we have. And so there's always going to be new layers coming up. But the cool thing and the thing to be excited about is to look at it like, wow, you know, what's my empowerment opportunity here? Because every level that we heal of the mother wound, especially, we gain a whole new level of access to our power and our potential and ability to have a whole new experience in our lives. So really, if you look at challenges that way, when you have a big challenge come up, a big trigger of some kind, what that's really saying is that you're ready for your next level of power.
So you're leveling up, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I was thinking about what you were saying earlier about the enmeshment and the being fused with your mother. It's that enmeshment and fusion with the wound that if you don't take a look at this wound and go deeper into this healing process, whether you like it or not, that wound is in your present moment. So it really benefits you to go on this healing journey, this adventure, as you described, so that at least the way that this wound is being experienced can shift for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't see it as a negative, like, I'm not healed, I'm defected, or there's something wrong with me. I see it as you are like a spiritual warrior. You are a spiritual adventurer. You are adventuring into your deepest self.
Yeah.
And that, I think, as a culture, we need to place that in a very revered place.
Yeah.
You know, as a culture, we haven't yet, just as I think more of us are, and the culture is transforming, but as more of us begin to have reverence to the inner journey, the more we're going to really see our world change in ways that maybe we can't even imagine right now. So I think it's really exciting. Another thing I wanted to say about that is people who say, oh, it's in the past and don't go there. Eckhart Tolle has this amazing quote, and he said that something like, I don't remember it verbatim, but it's something like, you know, when we look around at the pollution and the degradation of the earth, you know, like garbage everywhere. He's like, what that is a metaphor for millions of people not taking responsibility for their inner self, their inner space.
Wow.
And I really believe that, you know, we have to clear and take responsibility for what we've been through, because whatever we refuse to own, we will pass on. So it's kind of our responsibility, I think, as human beings on this planet, to being a conscious adult and to deal with what happened to us as children, especially women. I feel even more passionately about, because we are descendants of women who have been oppressed for centuries, thousands of years even, and we carry a lot. You know, we carry our mother's wisdom, courage, tenacity. We carry so much good stuff from our mothers, but we also carry so much pain.
Yeah.
And the world is now starving for feminine values and the values of the feminine, things like the value of listening, the value of slowness, the value of the body. All of these values, the world is just starving for them. But in order to really embody the feminine values that the world needs, we have to look at the places that we have felt in exile from the feminine.
It's so beautiful, Bethany. It really is. I'm just so moved by your passion. And, you know, when you were speaking right now, it just came to my mind is that quote by Jung, which is, the greatest burden on the child is the unlived life of the parent, meaning wherever the parent was stuck, wherever the parent didn't grow, wherever the parent struggled, in some way, the child carries that burden. And it will look different for everyone, but that is also a metaphor for we as a people on this earth and the planet. So really the significance of healing the mother wound really cannot be minimized in any way. It's so big. It's huge.
It's so big. Exactly. And people say, well, how can you heal it in this lifetime? And can you really, do this? And what I like to say is I believe yes. And I think it's because we're at this particular time where, I see clients and students of mine go through levels of healing that took me like way longer. There's some kind of quickening. There's some kind of cultural and earth, there's something about this time. There's something about this time. So I think we're very blessed to be alive right now and be aware of this wound and to take in the magnitude of it, and then to feel empowered to actually lean into it and to see it as not an enemy, not something to be ashamed of, but really stepping into your power and your truth in this life and the way to embody it. There's a lot of talk these days about, being an awakened woman and the divine feminine, the rise of the divine feminine. But I am very skeptical in many ways of that, because I believe that a lot of that is conceptual and it's very intellectualized. It's kind of marketized and commodified. I really believe that if you want to embody the divine feminine values that the world needs right now, it is incomplete unless you look at the mother wound. This has to be a core part of a world that embodies the feminine. Otherwise, it just kind of remains like a soundbite.
Yeah.
And so I see healing the mother wound as really like an initiation process of that, of building that inner structure within us that is necessary to truly embody our power. This is a very big power, the power of the feminine. It's a huge power, and it can't be just done in a workshop or a one weekend or, it's really, a lifetime commitment to go bravely into our shadows, into our wounds, our deepest heart wounds, and nurturing ourselves there, mothering ourselves there. And it is a birth. I believe that for each woman, each man that does this journey, it's a birth. It's a deep birth of birthing oneself into the world. And what we can give ourselves, then we can give others. What we can embody within, we can model for others. So it's such a deep gift, not only to yourself, but also to those that are coming after you.
Bethany, thank you so much for your insights, your wisdom, your passion regarding this very, very relevant, timely, and meaningful topic. I am just so inspired by you and moved by everything that you've shared.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be here. It's been wonderful to share this time with you, and I want to thank your listeners as well for taking the time to listen. Thank you so much. This has been really fun.
And Bethany, what is the best way for listeners to maybe get in touch with you, find out more about you, and also if you want to share any upcoming projects or events that our listeners might want to learn more about?
Absolutely. My website is womboflight.com. So you can find me there. I teach an online course which teaches my 7 steps of how to heal the mother wound. And I also coach women as well, do private coaching in a year-long program called the Emergence Program, which looks at the connection between healing the mother wound and embodying more of your feminine leadership in the world. I also teach workshops internationally. And for those of you who might be like, oh, maybe I'll want to learn a little bit more, there's a ton of free articles on my website, as well as a free ebook called Transforming the Inner Mother, and become the mother you've always wanted to yourself. So there's a lot of tips in that ebook that you can kind of, get inspired and also start doing some practices of inner mothering. And you can find that on my website. It's a free download. And I'm also teaching a 5-day retreat on healing the mother wound at the Kripalu Yoga Center in Western Massachusetts. That's going to be at the end of January 2017.
And all of the resources and information that you shared, Bethany, we'll make sure that they go into the show notes.
Wonderful. Yeah, I look forward to connecting with more of your audience. Thank you.
Take care. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Bethany. What stood out for me is the immense significance of the mother wound and how its effects permeate all aspects of existence, from the personal to the spiritual, to the cultural, to the societal. It really touches all aspects of our lives. And so while the consequences of not healing the mother wound are great, the potentialities and gifts of embarking on this healing journey are just as profound. There's a quote that Bethany had on her website that really captures the theme and the energy and the significance of our conversation, and that is, no other relationship has the power to limit us or to liberate us as the relationship with our mother does. For show notes to today's episode and for links to all the resources mentioned, please visit www.lourdesviato.com/women in depth. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe on iTunes and leave a review. Thank you so much for listening, and see you next time.